Hi everyone, I'm Garrett. Today's going to be a little bit different. This video is kind of out of schedule with the other videos. And it's because it's just going to be a little bit more naturalistic and a little bit, well, it's not going to be scripted at all. And the reason for that is that what I've decided I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing kind of session reports on my games and just talking through what the players did. Now, and the reason I'm choosing now to do it is because I've just started a new campaign. I've started running Curse of Strahd. It's actually the fifth time I've run Curse of Strahd. I've run it three times for fifth edition, once for the rule cyclopedia, kind of the rule cyclopedia version of like Beckme. This pretty cool. I ran that few. That was the last time I ran it, and then I have just started running it for my own game, Journeyman Expert Master. Now, one thing that I'm going to do in the set reports, just because I think it's like fair and like the right thing to do, is that I'm just going to refer to the players and the characters as the same person, kind of like semi-anonymize my players. I think that's fair. So the party is four people. They're actually these characters have been playing for quite a long time. These characters we've been playing more or less weekly. We probably play three times a month, and we've been playing three times a month for like the last sort of year or so. There's four characters. They're about 12th level, which is that is about 8th level in D&D 5e. So it gives you some sense of the kind of power. And they've actually they've done lots and lots of OSR, kind of like indie scenarios. They've done Winter's Daughter. What else have they done? They've done the Wizardarium of Calabraxis. They've done loads and loads and loads of modules. They've done the Gardens of Yin. Never done the Stygian Library. Might throw that at them at some point. But they have also done Night Below, which is a massive second edition campaign. Now, as I said, I'm not going to edit these videos at all, and we'll just kind of see what happens. Now, of the four characters, they're a pretty balanced party. There is Devron, who is a human wizard. They're all humans. So there's Devron, a human wizard, and he's this kind of like preening, kind of powdered, like Nosferatu-like looking wizard. He's pretty fun. I like that. I like game mastering for that character. There is Bugma or Bujma, who is a female kind of like ranger, but she has a pistol, and she's more kind of in my setting. She is a kind of escaped janissary. She's a kind and ranger kind of like best fits her kind of like general adventuring style. There is Kevin. Kevin is a druid, and there is Philip, and Philip is a fighter. And all of them have, like I said, they've all worked together on previous campaigns. The players know each other really well, and the characters know each other really, really well. So we started Curse of Strahd. I thought that this would be a really, really good one. One of my players is a massive fan of like gothic fiction, loves Dracula, and I thought, wow, like I think Curse of Strahd is one of the best campaigns that's ever been written. So I was like, let's run this. So we started it. Now, the way of starting the module is you're supposed to just get them into Ravenloft somehow. You're supposed to kind of like get them into the mist. And one of the things they can do is they can meet the Vistani. And the Vistani are these kind of traveling people. I don't, they're kind of like a play on kind of like Romani, kind of like Sinti traveling folk. And the characters meet these. They appear in the very original version of Ravenloft, I6. And then they wake up in the setting of Ravenloft, the Death. So I actually changed the beginning slightly. My players went to a carnival in one of my biggest cities, and the carnival was, it was kind of like run by these Vistani. I've run the Wild Beyond the Witchlight before, and that opens with a carnival, and I really liked that. So these Vistani kind of running a carnival, and they got the reading. They got a tarot reading, the Taroka reading. Now, they're supposed to get this once they're in Ravenloft, in the setting, in Barovia, but I brought it forward and put it at the beginning for a few reasons that become more obvious as we kind of go through this, hopefully. And they get their card reading. This reading reveals that they're going to face something terrible, Count Strahd von Zarovich of Ravenloft. And then they get kind of like some cryptic hints at these kind of items and allies that will help them in defeating him. So they did that, and it was in the middle, and they're like, oh, well, what's that got to do with it? And they were doing all these other carnival things. Like one of the characters, like Philip was like wrestling like Wolverines. I think that's really good fun. There's in the role play book for Warhammer Quest, I've talked about Warhammer Quest before. It's my most popular video. One of the tavern events is like Uli the Wolverine trainer or something like that, and I love the idea of like that being sort of something kind of carnival-esque, kind of like something the characters do, like arm wrestling, like Wolverine fighting. Just sounds really fun to me. So they did like the Wolverine fights. There was lots of different stuff on. There was like carnival stocks. The way I was running it was kind of informed by how the Schappenfest is running. In Shadows over Bergenhafen, the first part of the Enemy Within campaign for Wooferup. My setting is kind of very kind of like late medieval, at least where the characters are, it's very late medieval. It is kind of like a very early Renaissance. There's a kind of a bit of Woofrupness to it. So they got the card reading. They're like, oh well, this is interesting, but it doesn't seem to kind of amount to much. And then they went to their home. They have a house in this city. And then they woke up and they were in Ravenloft. So they were surrounded by mist. And that's when the module officially started. And that's how the module is supposed to start. They're supposed to wake up in Barovia or find themselves in Barovia. And it was great, right? I could describe the distant howling of wolves, the kind of like the oppressive closeness of the mist and the forest. And they stumbled onto the road. What is going on here? And it's just wonderful. They come across the gate to Ravenloft at the beginning, which is this kind of like giant kind of walled archway. And they can actually walk around it if they want. It's not really buying their way, but it kind of creaks open. And this marks the edge of kind of Strahd's domain. And I just think it's like absolutely fantastic. They spent quite a long time kind of like, is this like gateway magical? And I was like, well, the fog itself, they're rolling arcana tests and stuff, and they're like trying to go like, they cast detect magic. I'm like, well, the mist like is suffused with like abjuration magic and like transportation magic, and they're like, okay. And pretty quickly they were keying into the kind of gothicness of it. So they went through the gateway, and they're on the road down into the village of Barovia, which is it's kind of like the village that is like underneath Count Dracula's castle. That's the sort of like shtick. I was really surprised actually because when I was reading it, I couldn't find, and I don't even think it's in the book. I think I just imagined it, a kind of description of them seeing Castle Ravenloft for the first time. And one thing I don't think you can do very easily in a role-playing game is create a sense of wonder. I know some people on YouTube, like people like Ben Milton at Questing Beast, they talk about creating a sense of wonder in travel. And you can do it, but it's not easy at all. It's not easy to kind of stop and give a kind of developed description, have the players go, oh, wow. But I think I managed it with the description of Castle Ravenloft. What I did was I built the description of the village in the distance, kind of like shrouded in mist, and then this looming shadow kind of coming out of the mist above it, which was the pillar stone of Castle Ravenloft. And I named the castle as well, even though they don't know it. I just thought this adds a weightiness and a gravitas to this particular moment. And then what happens is the players, and it's in the book, the players kind of smell death on the air. Now, Ranger Bujma, she was like, okay, I'm gonna roll tracking, and I'm gonna kind of go and kind of see what that is. They found this body, and it's the messenger from the Burgermeister of the village, and it's kind of like, so he sends him off into this to try and get help because his daughter Irina Koliana has become the kind of interest of Count Strahd von Zarovich, the vampire that lives in the castle that overlooks the village. I had a series of wolves kind of, you can have wolves attack them according to the module, but these characters are like leveled, I think back to the level 12, I think there might have been more than that, like level 12, 13, 14, something like that. They're all slightly different. The wolves didn't turn up and attack, but then they headed down into the village. And man, that village is so well described. It reminds me of, on some level, obviously it's meant to be kind of like, yeah, playing Dracula, but it reminds me of the description of like moving down into, that the narrator gives us of moving down to Innsmouth in the Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. And, you know, there's all kind of all these like black old kind of like doorways and kind of boarded up shops and everything. And they hear a distant moaning. And one thing that I always find with these sorts of games is that whenever there's really kind of strong negative emotion in the setting or in the kind of narrative, so you get this in horror games, but it doesn't just have to be fear. It could be anxiety. It could just be kind of like a seriousness with which you're wanting them to take the adventure. What always happens is players end up being silly, and I think and that's okay, right? I actually think that some game masters get really angry. You see posts on like Reddit all the time and stuff like that where you're like, you know, like, oh, my players aren't taking my like Call of Cthulhu campaign serious, and it's like, no, it's just there's a kind of silliness in with this medium. And sometimes if you put people in a situation where it is a bit kind of there's a bit of despair, or there's a bit of anxiety, or a bit of fear, or a bit of tension, they often break that tension by just kind of like laughing, and that's okay. Now, one thing that's so the players kind of trundle in. I describe the money. I also describe the sound of cartwheels, because I know that there's the hag, right, with the dream pastries shuffling around the town. So I want them to go and deal with her later on. I describe entering the Blood on the Vine tavern, and they meet Ismark in there, and everyone. I talk about how when they go in, or everyone in the kind of like tavern stops and looks at them, and they're like glassy eyed, like not really, they're just like, what are you doing here? Like you're not from around here, and then they all turn back to their drinks. And sat in the corner, there's Ismark Kolyanovich, and he's drinking, and obviously he's there as kind of like one of the quest givers, and that's what happens. And they kind of strike a conversation with him, and he pretty quickly says that, oh yeah, my father's died fighting, trying to beat off the Count Strahd and all his minions, because what's happened is a series of this Count Strahd has become kind of obsessed with my sister Irina, and I need some help getting her either west to Valaki, which is a fortified town, or even further west to the monastery at Krezg, which is like a tiny village but with like a stone wall and everything around it, because we just need to get her out of the shadow of the castle, because Strahd has like decided that he kind of like, he loves her, and he's just going to keep coming back and coming back and coming back and just doing that until he has her. So they agreed, and he also said, okay, it was interesting. You know what? They never asked for how much he was going to give them or anything. So I'm like, I got that in my back pocket for now, what, we're getting paid for this? I don't know, you never asked. But he did also ask them, oh, can you help bury my father who died fighting Strahd a few nights ago? I think in the book, he's supposed to have like found it all too stressful and had a heart attack. And I just think that's rubbish. Like, in the sense that I get it, it's meant to be kind of like so full of dread and despair that like his heart has given out, but it just comes across as silly, I always think. So I said, oh yeah, the Burgermeister, Ismark and Irina's father, had died trying to kind of keep Strahd out of the house. And so they agreed. They sought out the kind of like their rooms. They decided that, okay, they were like, right, we get it. We like, the players were like, we get it. We're doing Dracula, basically. Like, we're in that kind of like setting. So they're like, okay, can we go to a general store? I was like, yeah, okay. Can we buy like, they were like garlic, and in fact, garlic was the big thing. They were like, I was like, oh man, like, okay, you can buy garlic. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try and make it prohibitively expensive. I was like, okay, it's really hard because you can't grow garlic here. And the Vistani, the travelers, kind of like occasionally come through and sell us it. So it's like 2 platinum each. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, oh. So then they've got an alchemy jug, which lets them, like pour different liquids. And I really foolishly, when I first gave them it, I was like, they were like, is there a way to like expand the liquids that are in it? And I was like, yeah, there is. You can just, I don't know why I said this, but I was like, oh yeah, you can just put, you can put any liquid you put in your alchemy jug, you can then pour that. It'll be a varying amount, but you can pour that. So they're like, pleasure. So what they did is they bought these cloves of garlic, crush, in a mortar and pestle, and then like made like garlic juice and put it in their alchemy jug. And I'm like, okay, pretty smart. And they're like, how's garlic work? And I was like, well, it only works on thresholds. There's nothing in the book for how garlic works against Strahd, if in any way it doesn't. Like, what about crucifixes? I mean, and I was like, yeah, you could get holy symbols of the Dawn Lord, which is this kind of like, I don't know how to put it. The Dawn Lord is kind of like a generic kind of positive deity that's in the Ravenloft setting. It was like, yeah, you can get symbols for that. So they get all this stuff, and that's when one of the characters, Kevin, the druid, he comes. Well, all of them. They came across this old woman like pushing this cart in the center of the village. She's like, yeah, I don't want to buy some of my pastries. And they're all like, what do they smell like? And I was like, they smell of garlic and sage and everything. And they're like, ooh, right? Should we buy? And they're all, no, don't buy it. Like, we know it's going to be bad. And so Kevin buys one. He eats it. He's like, the player's laughing his head because he knows something bad's going to happen. And you know what? I flipped through the book and I was like, man, I can't remember what dream pastries do. I know they're all like, they're kind of all vaguely negative. And I was like, okay, it takes away your ability to, when you eat it, he ate it and it's like she shovels off and I was like, oh, right, yeah, it's taken away your ability to like interpret music. I think small kind of minor things like that can really help develop a character. I've got a player in another campaign, she's lost her ability to not interpret music, but like interpret narrative. Like, she doesn't know like what the beginning of a story is or the end of a story. And that's been really interesting. And then my player, like Kevin's player, was like, "Oh, well, this is not so bad, right? Not being able to understand music." He was like, "What does it sound like now? What if I hear music?" And I was like, "Well, it's just like cacophonous screeching. Like it does. It's all like white noise. Like it just does. You can't see it as what it is, as like kind of like sounds put together for a purpose." And he was like, "That's great, right? I'm going to be resistant now to like immune to like half his song." And I was like, "All right, okay, whatever." So anyway, so they did all that, and then they rested at the Blood on the Vine Tavern, and I got to do the bit where like all the ghosts of previous adventures who tried to kill Strahd come out of the graveyard, and I was like, "Oh man, this is good," and just kind of like them all being like, "Oh wow, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be really hard actually. We're gonna struggle here." And then the next morning they went to I could have had like Strahd and like a lot of ghouls or whatever attack the mansion in the night, but I thought no, I just don't think that's not needed at the beginning. So they go to the mansion the next day, and the description that's in the book of the mansion is just like fantastic. Like I just think it's so sort of like creepy and interestingly. I'm actually going to read you. I've got it here. So a weary-looking mansion squats behind a rusting iron fence. The iron gates are twisted and torn. The right gate lies cast aside while the left swings lazily in the wind. The stuttering, squealing clang of the gate repeats with mindless precision. Weeds choke the grounds and press with menace upon the house itself. Yet against the walls, the growth has been tramped down to create a path all round about the domain. Heavy claw marks have stripped the once beautiful finish of the walls. Great black marks tell of fires that have assailed the mansion. Not a pane nor shard of glass stands in any window. All the windows are barred with planks, each one marked with the stains of evil omen. I just love that. I think one thing that it conveys really well is the fact that this is not just like a crumbling manor, but it's been under attack by Strahd and his ghouls like consistently and like many times recently. And my players go in. They see the Burgomaster. His corpse is there in a box. Sorry, in a coffin. His mark's there. He's like, "Thanks for coming." And there is Irina, his sister. One thing that I mentioned to them is, and I said, I don't know how you would say, I actually said just like this, I'm not sure how to say this without kind of like how to kind of convey this, but it is obvious that Irina is not of the same parentage as Ismark. And they're like, "All right, okay." So they were trying to work out, like, is she adopted or is she like a half sister or whatever? Is there two different parents here, like two different mothers that we're not going to meet? And then so that's going on, and then they agree, and she explains that Strahd has like actually got into the house once and bitten her, and they're like, "Oh, all right, okay, we need to be careful here." And then Ismark says, "We need to bury my father, and then we can set off west." So they take the corpse. Philip, the fighter, just like lifts up the coffin, like walks through the town, takes it there, gets to the chapel, and man, that chapel where Donovich the priest is so bleak, and I just love it. They go in, and you get this really elongated description of how kind of like everything is lit up with candles, and there's a guy kind of like softly praying, this kind of like cream-faced kind of like priest, kind of shaky, and then every kind of like few moments, a shriek comes up from beneath the floorboards from like the chapel's undercroft, like, "Father!" And they're like, "I'm starving!" And the characters learn that the priest, his son, Doru, has like attempted to fight Strahd like some time ago. Failed, was bitten by Strahd and sent back as a vampire spawn. And Donovich, the priest, has kept his son like locked in this undercroft since then, and he hasn't fed him obviously because he wants to drink the like blood of people. And it's just, oh man, I'm like, there's a few moments like this where I'm like, okay, Ravenloft actually does do a good job of like gothic. It's not just it's not just like a gothic theme pack. There's not just like the accoutrements of gothicism. It's actually it is pretty like really gothic. So then what happens is they talk to Donovich. He reads not the last rites. He kind of like does the funeral rites, and he emphasizes to them like, "Don't go to Vallaki. You'll have to go to Vallaki through Vallaki, the fortified city, but just keep going to the monastery, the Abbey of Saint Markovia in Krez, because the abbot there is kind of like a good guy, and it's like more fortified and it's further away from Castle Ravenloft." So that's what they do. They set off then. They come to the junction there where they can go down to the Sir Pool, which is where the Vistani in Ravenloft are actually camped, in Barovia, camped, or they can kind of take the high road. So they go the high road, they go across the ancient kind of bridge. I'm rolling for random encounters throughout this quite specifically. I said it'd take a couple of days. I just didn't measure the hexes. I just don't think it's important. I think you need to give a sense of scale as well to the Ravenloft. And then on the second or third day, when they were setting up camp, they got attacked by werewolves. They get attacked by 5 of them. Now, these are really capable characters. These werewolves, like, they tear into camp. Ismark and Irina are able to kind of like battle them off. Kevin the Druid, he casts Wall of Flame and surrounds the camp in a kind of like this flaming conflagration, which helps kind of keep off most of the werewolves. But some of them are already kind of like in the center when he casts this. Bushma, I said she has a firearm, she has a pistol. She's a kind of like I said she's like a janitor. She's like she's got this like flintlock. She kind of like unloads into this werewolf at the far side of the camp, blows its brains out, and then there is Devon. He's casting like different spells, like mainly kind of like bolt and stuff to try and bring them down. And it works really well. And it's a really engaging and combat encounter, but it's just like a random encounter. They drive them off. They don't actually kill all of them. I think either 2 or 3 of the werewolves got away. There is a werewolf camp, right? So they're going to go report back. Philip, the fighter, he's like attacked pretty aggressively by these werewolves. Beginning of next session, I'm going to have him roll a save versus endurance to see if he's been affected by lycanthropy. I think that'd be kind of quite fun, but we're going to leave that up to the dice, and it will just depend. It was really, really, really good fun. That was the end of the session. Next session, obviously, we're going to begin with that save, and we're going to get towards Valarkit, and there is Old Bone Grinder as well between here and there. I'm glad that they've interacted with this kind of like old woman and the Dream Pastries already. This with Morgantha, that's her name. And it was really, really, really good session. I had forgotten. I haven't run Curse of Strahd since 2019. Since before the pandemic, and that's it. I've ran it for like Beckme, like basic expert master, so basic expert companion master, immortal back then, like BXD&D basically. And I'm really enjoying running it as a game for journeyman expert master, my own game Gem. It's working really, really, really well. One thing that Gem does that works is that it keeps the kind of hit points of everything relatively low, even high level characters. So these characters are kind of perfectly capable of casting these different things, and it's performing kind of great feats and acts. But they've only still got like 15 hit points. They can still, like, if a werewolf goes in on them, they're gonna need help, or they're gonna need to be lucky. It's not, pitch battles are not great. So that is session 1 of my new Curse of Strahd campaign. Like I said, I'm not going to edit this. I'm just going to put it up there. You can have a look at it. I hope that is helpful. And Gary, I'll speak with you again when I've done another session. Thank you.